Oh, yeah. I should have come to you. I said I was.
Anyway, welcome everybody. We have a small turnout, but that's all right. I'm excited to have Paul here, and he's going to fill us in on what's happening with the intercultural ministry and things in his life. Most of us know Paul because we've been praying for the Carlines for years as they worked in Kenya. But I did find a little write-up on Paul, and there were things I didn't know. So I'm just going to introduce you with this little write-up that I found. So he is a Reverend. Reverend Paul Carline received a Bachelor of Religious Education from Prairie Bible College and studied at Moody Graduate School, Columbia College, Cambridge University, and Carey Theological College. For 6 years, Paul pastored a 3-church field in New Brunswick, prior to work as global field staff with Canadian Baptist Ministries in Kenya from 1995 to 2012. The Carlines' work in Kenya focused primarily on mission and discipleship within Kenya's urban and rural Somali and refugee community. Since 2012, Paul has been director of the CVAC's Intercultural Ministries, encouraging cross-cultural relationships with historic and newcomer communities in Atlantic Canada, including coordinating our refugee response beginning in 2015 and ongoing till now. Paul also pastors at Bloomfield Baptist Church and teaches mission and world religions at Crandall and St. Stephen's Universities. So there's a little background and a little bit of what's going on now. So I asked Paul to come and talk today just about what's going on with the intercultural ministries, what it involves, what kind of things are happening with refugee families that started in 2015. You can talk about whatever you like, Paul. Maybe fill us in on the family too. And then there's he's going to leave lots of time for questions. So if you come up with some questions, I have a few for you.
Good.
And I'll let you talk more.
Great.
So I guess we'll open in prayer, and then we'll let you go.
Okay.
So let's pray. We thank you, Father, for this day and this time to be here together. We thank you that Paul could be here. And we just pray that you would open our eyes to the mission of reaching out to others who are new to our country. And we just ask that your Spirit would be here among us, and we would respond to whatever you are nudging us to do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, thank you for being here. And thank you for having me here. And I always think of Moses' story when at the burning bush, and when God said, "Take off your shoes, you're on holy ground." And I think whenever we come into someone's presence, in a way we're in holy ground. Someone in the image of God, and another person, just like God. So it's good to be together here. And may Jesus minister to us. He took off his outer clothing and washed his disciples' feet when he was in their presence. It's amazing. Do you mind sharing your names? This might not show up on the on the camera very well, but so I met Rita.
Yes, that's right, Rita Lutz.
Rita Lutz.
Brenda Condon.
Brenda.
Alicia Johnston.
Alicia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Carolyn Steves.
Doug Steves.
And Mac.
And Mac. Good. And Andy behind the camera. I'd like to start just with a little scripture verse. Probably the most important thing I'll share. And this is Mark chapter 1, verses 9 to 11. at that time, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And just as Jesus was coming up out of the water, he saw heaven being torn open and the Spirit descending on him like a dove. And a voice came from heaven. You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased. And you know, Mark, the gospel writer, it's the shortest gospel, and he moves very quickly through the events of Jesus' life. And yet he gives quite a bit of detail to Jesus' baptism, and says some things that the others don't, as far as like Jesus seeing heaven open. Some of the other gospel writers talk about how John saw it, but it says that Jesus saw it, and Jesus heard the voice saying, "You are my Son." And this is, of course, at the very beginning of his ministry. And if it was important for Jesus to see that and to hear that before he started his ministry, how important must it be for us to somehow hear that, of God saying to us, "You are my child, who I love. I'm pleased with you." Before you try to do anything for me, start on this foundation. You're my child, and I'm already pleased with you. Because I'll have to say that, and it's wonderful that the women's missionary group, prayed, and the church prayed for Kelly and I, because we sure needed it. Because I think both Kelly and I went into overseas ministry and other ministry in a way to earn that approval. We've been taught, good Christians do this, so we did that, and we thought that was going to give us points, I guess, and it's been quite a journey of realizing that the Father just wants us to be his children and to know how loved we are, and then of course we can really love and serve, and then it's for other people and it's not for us. We're doing it for them and not for us, and I'm still on that journey, and this is something I need to remind myself every day. And sometimes I don't remind myself. Sometimes I don't take the time to hear the voice. But my days are different when I do. It's freeing. And it gives you a great confidence and courage too. So, okay, this is why I'm going to walk around. We're going to test Andy's equipment here. No touching, you want to see if it works? Okay, here we go. What happens when I walk towards you?
Same thing.
Okay. So, quick picture of my family. Look, Andy, look. oh, you're letting the camera look. Okay, yes.
Oh, I was looking at the camera, yeah.
Yeah, so this was taken 5 years ago.
Oh my.
So our youngest Keenan is now, how old is he? He's now 21. So he's changed the most in 5 years. Yeah. Kids hate the old pictures and the parents love the old pictures. So this was us 5 years ago. That was I think it was 6 years ago, because it was our 25th anniversary, and we were 31 this year. So yeah, 6 years ago. But this is why I really decided to show pictures.
Ah, beautiful.
Oh, and maybe, no, I'll keep going around in circles here, just to work the camera. He's going to have to recharge his battery after this second. Our oldest daughter, Katie, had a baby in July in Halifax, just after the bubble opened up there. So we got to go.
You were able to go see her.
Yeah, we did.
Isn't she beautiful?
Yeah, Beatrice.
Oh, what a nice name.
Yeah.
That's my second name.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wonderful. It's her grandmother's. It's her grandmother's second.
I have a great granddaughter with that name.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Mother Beatrice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Paul, you're very that. People had told us, nothing like grandchildren, and I guess we experienced that. So many people had told us that we were waiting there at the house. Well, no, they'd already got to the house from the hospital. But when we arrived, I was thought, okay, everyone's told me how incredible this is, and I was slightly disappointed at first.
It's great.
But
It's great being a grandparent. You spoil them and send them home.
Yes. But she certainly grew on me. I think when you're a grandparent, you get to see them as a person. I think as parents, we're so insecure, and they reflect so much on us and our parenting. And we're so nervous about it all. But we just got to look at her as a person and delight in her as a person. This is our daughter. This isn't the mom. This is our second daughter, Kara, holding her niece.
Okay.
Yeah. So this was a few weeks after.
Great to happy to too.
Yeah. And I said to Kelly on the way to Halifax.
A lovely picture.
I said to Kelly on the way to Halifax that this little girl, Beatrice, doesn't know how fortunate she is. She's been born to a mom and dad who are together and stable, born in Eastern Canada, 2 sets of grandparents, so much going for her. And
in a Christian family.
And she's receiving all that a baby would ever want and need to receive, and especially this holding and this eye contact. And when I was holding Beatrice, and at the very beginning, it doesn't seem like she's even conscious of that you're there. But then as the days go by, she's starting to focus more. And now, we weren't there for this, but now she's smiling. And I think that's the next picture. Oh, yeah, okay. This is all you're going to remember about this. Paul came all the way from Hampton to show us pictures of Beatrice. Okay, you have to stop studying now, Alicia. Look at my granddaughter. I said to people, this is the one we've all been waiting for, the world's first or second, I guess, after Jesus, perfect human being. She's finally arrived. Here she is.
Very happy.
Yeah. But and you can see in these smiles that she's now becoming conscious that she's loved and delighted in. And she has her moments when she's not sure of that, of course, and she panics. But little Beatrice is, even when she doesn't seem to be taking it in. I was very aware that this is meaningful. This care, this love, this contact is developing her brain. And it really if there was a sad tinge to it, it was realizing that this was something our boys didn't get when they were born. Our youngest guy was found on a garbage heap at a newborn, and he was already bruised. And his older brother has a similar story. He was found at birth, but he was left outside a hospital. But they both went to a government hospital after birth, different hospitals, about 3 years apart. And they were neglected. They were put in a crib, waiting to see if a parent might show up or a relative might show up and claim them. And they almost died, their first 3 months, they almost died in those hospitals. And they left in critical condition to an orphanage that only took critical condition babies. And so that first 3 months, at the orphanage, they got the holding and the medical care that they needed. They were both malnourished from the hospital. They both had pneumonia from the hospital.
How old were they when you got them?
6 months. So they were 3 months in the hospital, 3 months in the orphanage, and then home to us. And so we thought that they, they're the lucky ones, and in some ways they were. And now their life is going to be great, but we're learning how significant those early experiences are. And our boys have had and still will have a difficult journey in their life, because I wouldn't say it's a hard wiring, but it is very deep. They wonder if they're loved.
How old are they now?
20 and 23. Yeah. I think I'm right with that. Yeah, I guess I won't stop to do the math. Actually, I think it's almost 21 and 24. Yeah. So they're having their struggles, and so back to Jesus hearing that he is the loved Son. How important that is. And I wonder if this time of, especially at the very beginning when things got shut down, and we might go back to that. Who knows what this pandemic journey is going to be like. But I wondered if God was slowing his people down, stopping his children in their tracks, so that he could spend a bit more time with them and look into their eyes and tell them that you're the child I love. Because it made a big difference in Jesus' ministry. And surely we need it even maybe more than Jesus needed it. Because, So, when I mentioned that's been my journey of coming to terms of realizing this, and we're not missionaries anymore. You always think that the other side of the world is more exotic than where you live, but I think coming back here has made us realize, like, wow, what an incredible place, and there's just as many challenges and needs and opportunities here. It's totally different. There's pros here, but there's cons here, and there were in Kenya. We're really excited about being back in Atlantic Canada, and it's a challenge. It's no walk in the park.
Why?
Well, I think because the needs don't come knocking on our door like they did in Kenya. We felt like we were being so loving and serving, and we got back here and realized we're very capable of being just as selfish as everyone else. Enjoying just a comfortable life and not going out of our way. to help people. And that's very easy to do here. And I think in Kenya there were a lot of physical problems. Here there seem to be more spiritual problems. We had refugee friends who we met in the refugee camp when we first went over there in 95 or 96. And he was a tailor in one of our projects in the camps, the head tailor, a Sudanese family. And they were resettled by the Canadian government to Winnipeg in just like a year later. And he wrote to us from Winnipeg. This is back when you still had to write a letter. And in his letter he said, and he'd been in Winnipeg for a while, a year or so at least, and he said something we've never forgotten. He said, in Africa we had lots of trials, but we felt very close to God. He said, in Canada we have lots of temptations and we feel far from Him. And I think that really kind of maybe sums up the difference. We're lured away from God here because we have so many other things we can turn to, but they're idols and they're liars, and that, we have more mental disease and depression and suicide here than they experience in Africa. The problems there are more external. Here they're more internal. So, with intercultural ministries, it's said in the bio that we're thinking about historic communities, and of course we're referring to the indigenous people and the black Nova Scotians and black Canadians, who most of them came to this area back in the 1800s during the Loyalist time, and the Acadian community, though we're not really doing much there, at least my department isn't, and then the newcomer community, and that's been a lot of refugees, as far as a department goes. And all of these we all need to know that we're the beloved, and we run into problems when we don't know that. And I think a lot of the race things that are happening right now, people feeling like they're being racialized. I suddenly realize that it comes from generations of neglect and trauma. I just, a few months ago when we had the George Floyd murder, and of course, and the demonstrations and the protests and the riots are still going on from that. And it brought race to the foreground again, and it got me thinking about racism that we'd experienced in Kenya. We worked with a Muslim people group who didn't look up to us. They looked down on us. And so, I was at the brunt end of quite a bit of racism. And just all the talk about racism kind of reminded me of that, kind of some of the things that we'd experienced, being slandered and called out and stoned. But it was quite minor compared to what black people in North America experienced. And it was only me for a short period of time. And whereas for them, it was generational. And it really made me aware, if I've been impacted and traumatized a bit by my experiences, how much more? And so sometimes I know my black friends, sometimes you could say, no, that's not racism, you're overreacting. that was just, we all, that happens to us all. But they're dealing with this generational trauma, and they can't help how they feel. I know I've offended some of my black friends and acquaintances, totally unconsciously, and I could stand my ground and say, no, it wasn't a racist comment, but it was taken as one, and it's because of past history. And so I'm really thankful that we have an indigenous working group trying to move us closer to understanding and walking with indigenous people. We had a racism working group, actually, and then it kind of ended, and now we're talking about restarting that. So you might probably hear a bit more about that. But we're actually going to call some people together to lead us as a denomination, specifically in this area of race. And so it's...
Can that group have any influence on government? It's a hard issue even in this province right now.
Yeah. I think these issues, as we like we realize in our own life, you can't bury anything. It comes up. And I'm realizing that about myself. I realize that in our marriage. You end up dealing with everything, one way or another. And so I think these things are our relationship with indigenous people. I think in a way we wanted them to go away. Well, they haven't gone away. They're actually a growing demographic in Canada. The fastest growing demographic is the indigenous community. And so these tensions, now there's the tension about fishing, the fishing and lobster fishing, and these are, because they're starting to say, no, we're not disappearing, and we need to take our place like that we had in mind when we made the treaties, equal nations, and I don't know, maybe Canada will be one of the first countries that learn how to have two different nations sharing the same land, is really what the treaties were about. And we signed the treaties, our ancestors signed those treaties, but we never kept them. But yeah, so it's going to be quite a journey. So, the CBAC, I guess, we do have a political voice. We're shrinking in a way, but we do represent a lot of people. So there might be places where we can make statements that might help the government. We're certainly not being asked for that input, but on the other hand, our black leaders are being asked. They're run off their feet. Like some of our black clergy in Halifax, Dartmouth, are being asked all the time by the media and by the government to lend their voice, and so they're doing that wonderfully well. So we've asked them to sort of take control of a working group that will help resource our churches, so that we can be a bit progressive and be on the journey of reconciliation and walking together. Yeah, and I guess the only thing I'll say is refugees. Just a quick thing about that, and then we'll just have questions. We're still doing, you don't hear about it as much anymore, but we're actually, there was a year I think we brought 300 people in, but that was probably 2015, 2016. But last year and this year, every year is winning second place. So we haven't passed 300 again, but last year I think we were 120. This year we'll be 130. Next year we'll probably be actually I might be wrong with my numbers. We might be even closer to 150 already. So every year is growing because the refugee community that we now have, that we brought ourselves or that the government brought, they want to bring their relatives. And so we're not sponsoring unconnected refugees as much anymore. We don't have anyone really calling our office anymore saying, we want to sponsor a refugee, can you suggest somebody? That ship seems to have sailed. We love it when people do that because we have some recommendations that we can make. There's government programs you can take advantage of, or we actually have specific people that we could recommend, that we happen to know. But right now we don't have many churches or groups calling us like we used to, saying, give us a refugee, any refugee, we want to help refugees. But what we are having, we're getting calls every day, every week, from groups who are connected to families who are here, who want to bring relatives. They want to bring their refugee relatives. And so those are the cases that we're really dealing with right now. Family reunification. So it's actually it's a double bonus. You're helping a refugee, but you're also reuniting a family. The success rate of that type of sponsorship is even higher than other sponsorship, because when they arrive, they have a family waiting for them. The family who are waiting for them stay here because they're waiting for their relatives. So they don't leave. They're here waiting to be the hosts, and so it's a very successful type of sponsorship. So we're like I had a call this morning before I came here. A Palestinian man in St. John wants to bring his uncle and aunt and 3 children. He has all the money for it. Now we could deal directly with him. We could, and the government would allow us just to deal directly with him. We would probably ask him to put his money in a trust fund to make sure it's there, because the process takes a few years. So you never know what might happen to their money in the meantime. So put that in a trust fund, and then when they come, when the refugees come, they can. I guess we would administer the release of funds, but we don't do that. What we do is we try to connect that family. They're a Muslim family, they're Palestinians, the husband's from Gaza and the wife is from Syria. But we try to connect them with a church. We're trying to connect every case with a church. And sometimes, so the church actually signs the form. Sometimes, so then the church will hold the funds. And sometimes the church helps raise a little, but quite often the funds, they've been raising the funds because they so much want their relatives to come. So the church holds the funds. Sometimes the church has a volunteer team that's working right along with this family. They help furnish the apartment in preparation. They maybe help with the application. Sometimes it's more of an official role. Sometimes it's very as hands-on as you want it to be. And so we're looking for churches right now who would be willing to come alongside. It's in a way it's a neat way to connect with this international newcomer community around us.
How does the Canadian government, that is anything but religious, tolerate you designating a Christian church for a Muslim family?
Yeah. The private sponsorship program originated in the 1970s with the Vietnamese crisis and the Indo-Chinese refugee crisis, the boat people. And, the government of Canada was being pressured, to bring more. And it was a gentleman in Ontario who thought about this, if the government's not bringing, could we bring? Could private citizens sponsor? And the government went for it. And And since the private sponsorship program, and Canada is still the only country with that private sponsorship program, so the government started it, and churches, it was all done by churches. The Mennonite Church, Anglicans, Catholics, United.
We did a family here.
Yeah. And so the private sponsorship program has largely been churches. And so the government has come to trust churches and see that they do a good job, and we don't discriminate. And we love everyone. And we're not, we're not making it consequential on becoming a Christian and joining our church.
Yeah.
Now there's more other community groups that are now sponsors. Some of them are ethnic. Like there's especially in the bigger cities, there's Ethiopians who are formed a sponsorship organization like our own, and they mostly just sponsor their own Ethiopian people and things like that. But it's still by and large, it's still mostly churches. There's about 120, we call them sponsorship agreement holders with the government across Canada. We're one of them. And we're now the largest in Atlantic Canada. And we could become a lot larger because of this family reunification.
You said the process takes, I think you said 3 years or something. Why is it so long?
Yeah. It varies from visa office to visa office, depending on what country you're bringing the refugee from. Some of the visa offices have a terrible backlog of cases. And like Nairobi used to be 5 years wait list. That was their processing time out of Nairobi. They're getting the visa offices around the world are getting better. They have a goal that every one of them will be under 2 years, and most of them are already there. So they're doing a much better job. There's been a bit of a change. Canada Immigration used to think it was their job to keep people out. And then there's been a bit of a change where we realize we have nothing to lose by letting more people in. In fact, with our birth rates, that's the only hope we have.
Yeah.
So they're a lot less people. They're processing faster and they're refusing less. But there's still a strict screening process, and we still get some rejections. And quite usually they're sadly innocent people who just, didn't quite meet the criteria. Yeah. So it is becoming faster, because it was really hard to, like Brunswick Street in Fredericton, they sponsored an Ethiopian gentleman out of Nairobi, and it was over 7 years. So they almost had, of course they had to remind people again. About 7 years ago, we sponsored. He arrived and has been a delight actually to their church. So they would say it was well worth the wait, but exceptionally slow. Yeah.
You said 300 people came. I know when it was first thought about that, they were trying to get 50 families sponsored in Atlantic Canada. So I assume we did that.
Yeah. I mean, we said 50 families, but we didn't say between now, when and when. Well, within a year we had over 50 families, and then we kept on going. So we've lost count of families now. The government count people, not families, so we've started to do their system, and now we just keep track of people. So yeah, every year we're increasing. When I first came, there were only a few of our churches doing refugee sponsorship. The government gave us, because there's what do you call it? I've lost the term. There was a limit, right? There was thank you. That's the very word. And our quota was 6. 6 people, not 6 families, just 6 people a year. And I had to give back some of those spaces each year. One year I gave all back. And then it went wide open. And so since then, we've just, every year we've been increasing. The government's been increasing our quota. Yeah. So, which is exciting, and yeah, and there's some incredible stories, and there's some churches that would say, oh boy, that was hard from beginning to end, and I'm not sure if we'll do it again, We didn't develop the relationships we wanted to, they didn't seem as appreciative as we wanted them to, because these are families in trauma. Some end up, some get here and then they tell you that, oh, we actually have a relative in BC who we want to go. But like I say, the family reunification ones, you end up getting to interact with the refugee family, but also the permanent residents who are already here. You get so that's tends to be more successful. I just read a report from Timberley Baptist outside of Halifax. They've done 4 families in the last little while, and their last family, it started out as 1 person and it grew to 6. And they've gone through like not a split in their church, but a downsizing, and all of a sudden this one person who became 6, and they were looking at needing a lot of money, because it wasn't just 5 kids, or they were standalone adults that each would have needed their monthly check, and they were looking at like $70,000, and miracle, and it was a bit of a regional effort. They received some outside help. We advertised and said, hey, so it was great to have a denomination, and we, several churches helped them. But yeah, they got the money, and the family arrived, and it was a Christian family out of Africa who had endured terrible, terrible things. Almost every member, separately. And the reason why they kept growing is they kept finding siblings who they thought they'd lost. And I just read their 6-month report, and they're all working. Every one of them is working. So they're not even using some of the money they raised because they're all working. So they're just getting to hang on to that as a contingency. Yeah, so quite a success story, that one.
What percentage who come to New Brunswick stay in New Brunswick as opposed to going back to Ontario or BC or wherever?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been surprised that now Timberley sponsored another family, another Christian family, Pakistani people out of Bangkok, Thailand, and I just found out they moved to Duncan, BC, because there was an Urdu-speaking community there where they had connections. The husband was a pastor, and he was called to pastor the church there. So, but we're retaining about 90%, so it's quite high, the retention rate, at least for the first year, and then there's some travel after that, and we've had some travel and return. Yeah, because they always think the grass might be greener. Yeah, there was another African family who were sponsored by a church in the Annapolis Valley, and they went to Hamilton because they had not relatives but tribes people in Hamilton, and they went, and the church had done such a good job in Kentville that they came back. I told the group, I said, they'll be back. You guys, kids were all in sports, the husband had a job, it was, they were well looked after, and they saw it themselves. They went to Hamilton, tried it, and came back.
On a personal note, your 2 boys obviously are people of colour, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
How has their experience been in Canada as far as, Black Lives Matter?
Yeah.
and all of that, like in the schools and so on?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for asking that. When the George Floyd thing happened, my wife was smart enough to text our boys and say, "How is this making you feel?" And the older guy texted back and said, "I have more feelings than I can put into a text." And we were like, "He has feelings?" and our younger boy said, "I haven't stopped crying." And because their experience is so different. You know, they came from a country where, you know, black people were the leaders and were not looked down on. And but yet, and we'd gathered that all of their experience here was positive. You know, and a lot of it was, they would say, a lot of it was, you know, they got attention in a way because they were black, you know, they were cool, you know, but they said, you know, they said that there's also been comments, you know, people using that as a chance to put down, you know, the old competition that kids have in their insecurity. So they said each of them would say that they've experienced some slurs and things, but you know, but certainly, you know, minimal to what you know, generations ago were experiencing. But yeah, it's made us more aware of this, you know.
I guess I was wondering what groups in Moncton sponsor families, or you know, there's certain churches in the area that are sponsoring.
Yeah. You really need my my colleague Jacqueline here, because I went down to quarter time, and so I basically handed the refugee sponsorship to Jacqueline because she came to assist me because I don't have any administrative skills. And so when things started to roll, you know, and it required record keeping, she was one of our support staff in the office, and she said, how can I help you? And I said, I don't even know. I said, how about, it's probably the best thing I ever did. I said, here's a website you can go to learn about the private sponsorship program. And they have an online course you can take. And I said, just study that website and take the course. And so she just kind of learned it from the ground up, and not just the nuts and bolts of how the program works, but she became passionate about refugees. She saw what the plight was and what the opportunity was, and she really saw the big picture too. So she really became passionate, and so steadily I handed more and more things over to her. So she could answer that question right off. But so I only know the past ones in Moncton. I mean, there's been a lot. I could look it up, I guess. I mean, Salisbury, I know. Sunny Bray, First Baptist, Journey. Louisville, yeah. Hillside, no. Yeah, I should. Yeah, I know there's. Is it West Lane? Do we have a West Lane? Yeah,
Yeah.
West Lane are sponsoring.
And how long do the families have that? Are they always under a sponsor?
It's a 1-year commitment. It's a 1-year commitment. So they're not eligible for social assistance for that first year. So that's what the funds are all about. So that's clothing, housing, everything. So they're looked after for their first year. And you know, some get jobs, but most don't. And it's, in a way, they're not even encouraged in the first year. It's more language learning, culture learning. And I don't know what the percentage would be who then go on social assistance. It's quite high, and the government knows it's going to be high. I mean, these people are coming in with a deficit. You know, they just come in with suitcases and no language, and so they know it's going to be. So we're always surprised at when they don't. You know, the guy who called me today, the Palestinian man, was one of our sponsored refugees himself, and he found work within his first year, and he's doing very well. So, but yeah, officially 1 year commitment. Quite often, of course, the relationships continue. Yeah.
And you were also involved with the formation of how we address indigenous peoples and
Yeah.
the reconciliation
Yeah.
document, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks to people in our churches. Like when I first started, you know, the only thing I was thinking about was the newcomer communities. And people in our churches said to me, they said, we can't forget about, you know, the people who welcomed us, and we can't go forward until we go back. And I think that sentiment is growing. It's really growing. And so we're hoping to host a conference here in the future, next year or two. Western Canada, the Baptists in Western Canada and Ontario, Quebec have been doing this, and we would like to do it. And just have Indigenous people speak to us, and so we can learn from their perspective what it means to be Indigenous and Christian, and Indigenous in this area. And one good neat thing is, because of COVID, thanks to COVID, one of the conferences that was slated for this October in Ontario is now going to happen online. And so it's open to everyone, free of charge.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be October, I think the start date is 20th. And it's going to be every week for 5 weeks. It'll be an evening, it'll be 8 till 10 our time. So 8 till 10, a midweek evening. It's different days, different weeks for some reason. They didn't stay with the same day. But yeah, so that's, I just sent an email to our communications guy and said, get this on our website. I want people to take advantage of this, of listening to some of these speakers. Because that's been my experience. The more I listen and get to hear their perspective and get to hear the history from their perspective, and the less fearful I become. Because it is all about land and resources, in a way. And you get fearful. It's just like, oh my, how's that going to work out? But when you hear them, I don't know, it takes the fear away. They, in a way, they're not looking for a lot. They're looking for the respect they were never given. And I think they bring so much to the table. We could actually end up using our land and resources a lot better by listening to some of they're very, a lot of them are very, part of Indigenous culture is they believe it's their responsibility to look after the land. And so it would be, and I think they would still do development, but they want to fish. So it's not that they wouldn't, but so I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if we could ever. There's a lot of angry Indians because of past hurts, but But there's a lot of hopeful people too. They say we have more hope now than we've ever had. You know, there's been things happening. And I said, boy, if I know, because I was oblivious, and now if I know and I'm aware, there's hope for more people getting to know and becoming aware. And they see that. They see that there's a change. So.
Does anyone have any other questions for Paul? I guess I was wondering what you're doing at Crandall.
It's a missions class. I'm not a professor and not an academic, but I'm sort of just a lecturer. Malcolm Card is sort of the professor on record, and so we co-teach that. And yeah, it's part of their Claystone program and the BTH programs. Theology and practice of missional living. Some days I'm not sure if I do missional living, but yeah.
Where's home for you now?
Hampton.
Hampton.
Yeah. When we first came back, we settled in Quispamsis, and we moved to Hampton to be a little closer to the church then pastoring. And I grew up in Hampton. So my family were immigrants. I came from England when I was 10. And Mom bought a house in Hampton. Dad worked at Irving Oil Refinery. And the people we bought our house off of led us to the Lord. It was just a very pivotal time in my family's life. My older sister had just died before we came to Canada. And I think my parents, they were just, hurting. And this family loved us and let us know about God's love. So there's great opportunities with immigrants. I hear so many people's testimony, immigrants say, I found Christ when I came to Canada. Yeah, very interesting.
And I think you told Rita and I about just what Kelly is up to these days. Might be of interest to others.
Yeah, when Kelly got a job, when we came back and felt like we were to resign from CBM and not return to Kenya, it was really Kelly's calling. We both felt excited about newcomers coming to Atlantic Canada, but Kelly got the first job around that, and she started working for the St. John YMCA, which is our version of MAGMA in Moncton, the Multicultural Association. The YMCA does that in St. John, and so she started out as a settlement counselor. In the private sponsorship program, the sponsoring group is the settlement counselor. They don't get one from MAGMA. They can go to language at MAGMA, and they can go to other training at MAGMA, but they won't get a settlement counselor who deals with housing and documents. That's the group that does all that. But so Kelly was working with government-assisted refugees, and so they didn't have a private group, and so she was a settlement worker. And then she ended up becoming the manager of the settlement unit, and then the Syrian crisis happened. So and by that time I was with CBAC and we were doing private sponsorship. So she actually learned from our model. She said, how are we going to receive all of these, because they used to own, MAGMA and YMCA would only get 40 a year maximum, 40 people. And then during the crisis they were getting 150, 200. And without an increase of funding. And how are we going to do this? But there was a lot of goodwill in the community. People wanted to help. And so Kelly started a volunteer program, 800 volunteers, there was one in Moncton here in Fredericton. Anyway, 800 people signed up in St. John and they formed private sponsorship groups. There was no money needed because the government was funding it all, but they did everything that a private sponsorship group. So we gave them the private sponsorship training to those groups so that they would know what to do, housing, documentation, what some of the first tasks are when they arrive, So she did that for a number of years and got burnt out. And she blamed Syrians for her grey hair. And so she took a year off and was helping me at the church. And then she went back to work, another sort of social type work, working with Horizon Health on a project which is reaching out to mothers with addictions. So she's a caseworker again. And her clients are all moms with drug addiction, drug or alcohol. Some of them still have their children, some of them, the children are in the foster system. And she's taking she's been doing a lot of learning and is currently enrolled in a course on spiritual direction. She's grown a lot in her own spiritual journey. And so she's taking some training in order to help other people. Alicia, do you know any indigenous people at school?
Not really sure.
Yeah, we don't have a big population of them around here, and sometimes, you wouldn't know if they are or not. But, if you ever have a chance to learn more about indigenous culture, and it's a beautiful thing. It's funny that we felt like it was a culture that we should try to wipe out, because of all the cultures in the world, the indigenous culture, and this is around the world, like, Aboriginals in Australia and the indigenous people in Africa. It's a very biblical culture. There's a very strong concept of the Creator and of the initial command to look after the earth, and a very welcoming culture. They have no concept of strangers. It's humanity. And when the settlers arrived here, they weren't seen as competitors. They were just seen as brothers and sisters we don't know. And but of course, we were coming out of Europe, where it was a fight for land and control of resources. And they had no idea that we were coming with that concept. But every culture has dark sides and weaknesses, and they lived in spiritual fear. So the Christians would say, that's part, that's there, but there's so much good there as well. A lot of the indigenous Christians are learning how to remain indigenous and still be a follower of Christ. Instead of becoming Western, they're realizing that, Jesus is Lord. He has to change our culture some, but not everything. He can enter into much of it. So.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear Cheryl Bear speak and kind of address those things.
Yeah, she's one of the speakers at the Ontario conference. I think she's on the first day. She's one of the speakers. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thanks for sharing all these things, letting us pick your brain and see pictures of babies.
He made quite a point for that.
I even did it with the Crandall students. Want to see my grandchild? Isn't she incredible?
We will just take a little bit of time to pray, and then I just have a few announcements, and then we'll have, I think Carol brought some snacks too, so we'll enjoy those and just time to chat more. So let's pray, and I'll just leave it open for anyone to pray, and I can close. And pray for Paul and Kel and the family. Pray for the CBAC, is that right? And the work that's being done there, for refugees in our community, or I guess we can call them newcomers, like once they're here.
Once they're here, they're no longer refugees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So newcomers in our community and the indigenous communities. So, so we'll just take some time to pray.
Father God, we thank you for the words that Paul has shared today. And thank you for the challenges that are behind them. Lord, we pray that through this time, through COVID, through just everything that's going on, Lord, that we don't lose sight of the relationships that are also important through these sponsorships and through this time, Lord. We thank you for the response that the churches around Atlantic Canada have had and the testimony that they are to your grace and your ability to provide. And so, Lord, we pray for those churches who are sponsoring today and are finding it difficult. Lord, that you just remind them of the grace that you have and that you have this. And so we thank you for the stories, for the challenges again of just getting to know the Aboriginal people around us and learning from them how we can glorify you more. So we thank you for that, God. I pray that you're with Paul and his whole family as they continue to work in your name and just share your love with those who need it, Lord. So we just pray you continue to bless them as they do that. And just thank you for this time this afternoon that we've been able to hear these stories and hear this truth.
Father, we pray for Dan and Melody. We thank you for the years that they have been working with CBN and with the, we know that even now, Melody is half-time with still working with the folks in Cameroon, and Dan is working half-time with the also involved with the First Nations languages in Canada, and we just pray for them in this work that they are doing, and we are so thankful that the New Testament has been finished in one of the languages in Cameroon, and there are others now that are taking over full-time for other languages with support from here, from Melody and Dan as Deacon also. We pray for Jeff Carter. We thank you for him, the work that he has done with Horizons, and we know that he also is no longer with CBN, but rather is working with Baptist World Alliance and has a partnership with Crandall University right here in our city also. Pray for him, thank you for the impact that he has had in leaders working with students all over the world. I just ask that you would continue to be with him in his ministry as he works for you.
Father, thanks that you love the world, you love the cosmos, that you entered it, that you overcame the world, death, reconciled all things back to you through your blood. And now you're waiting for that reconciliation to happen more and more. Lord, thank you that for your faithfulness. Thank you that you never give up on your church. Thank you for how you want us to be in relationship to you. Sometimes we're like the older brother in the story of the prodigal son, and we just get busy working, but we're not really in relationship. And we're doing all the right things, but not in relationship. And sometimes we're like the younger son, just knowing that we're being selfish and going off on our own way. Thank you that you are the Father that wants both sons to come in. And thank you that you're always calling us to you. And thank you that you have plans for this world. You have plans for your church, even during this time of pandemic. I just pray for Uplands here, that you would be drawing people close to you and getting a sense of what you're doing and what you want to do in and through them. Yeah, these are very interesting days, Lord. But, thank you that you are the Lord of them.
Father, we thank you for this time we've had and for Paul's insights. We thank you that meant to ask him to bring something from your word and didn't, and yet he did. And thank you that it reminds us how much you love us and that you want us to know that as we go out in ministry. And I just pray for those newcomer families in our area. Pray for each one that you would help each one feel welcomed and would put people in their paths that would help them. Thank you for those churches that do sponsor and any that are doing so this year. We just pray for your guidance and wisdom as they help with those decisions and paperwork and such that has to be done. We thank you too for the work that's been done with the indigenous communities and that there's hope on the horizon. All these things seem like such complicated social issues, Father, and overwhelming at times, but we just pray that as Christians that we can influence how communities approach things, and that we would just be loving people who can be accepted, and that it will make a difference in how these things are resolved. So we just pray, we pray that you might put new people in our lives that we can befriend, or maybe from the Black community or indigenous or a newcomer, and that we can share your love with them. We pray for those who have to make decisions and try and work things out to negotiate things like fishing and such. And we just thank you for Paul and the committee that made so much effort to give the paper and presentations on how we as a church can honor the indigenous communities. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for these people, and we just pray that each of us would go out and share your love this week. Thank you too for Carolyn and for providing some food for us, and all these blessings come from you. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
table. This was reminded of this when Paul was talking to us. Once we were strangers. This is a Syrian who's come to Canada, and the gentleman was supposed to look after him and help him, and he was very hesitant because he didn't know if he could get involved in somebody else's life or not. Well, he certainly did get involved in his life, and they became the very best friends. Catherine brought it to me and says, "You should read this book, Carolyn." I read it in one day. Well, I took her home and I read it in 2 days, and then read it after that.
Wow.
But it's a friendship with a Syrian refugee, and what it's taught me about loving my neighbor. And then this one is in Uganda, and this is a lady who's gone to Uganda in mission work, and she has adopted 13 kids, and so girls, so the pictures are all here and so on. And it's daring to hope. And I mean, when you said that in Nairobi, in Somalia, where you were, they were closer to the Lord with difficulties than here, well, that reminded me of this book, because she's not far from the hospital, and they can only stay a short time, and then they come back and live with her, even though she's got 13 other people living in the same house and so on. And yet not everybody comes out well. A lot of them end up dying, and the Lord is with her in it all. And at one point, they have to bring one person to the U.S. for surgery, and the people who come can't believe how big the houses are and how few people are in them, because they're used to little small pieces houses just crammed full of everybody. But they're very good reads. They're light reads, but they're thought-provoking for us. And when I come over here, I'll do all the pouring and all the touching, so you just pick up your things and be COVID friendly. Right, both sign out right there.
And just a couple of announcements. If you do want to attend ABW's 2020 annual meeting, they're doing it in Zoom or in person at Crandall, and you have to register by September 24th. By contacting Lisa. I think they sent an email about it, but you wouldn't see that, Rita. So there is a way, if you wanted to go to that meeting. Tidings too, we can also get on the website if you have a subscription to Tidings. So that's an easy way to print something out from it or something like that. And ABW is also promoting being a kaleidoscope of love. If you've heard Joanna Doak talk about butterflies, guess a group of butterflies is called a kaleidoscope, and she likes to think of butterflies as things that we do to reach out in love to other people. So we're being encouraged to do so, and kind of make note of things that you're doing to reach out to kind of remind you to do it, right? Can be anything from dropping cookies out to somebody, or I don't know, giving Brenda something. Support her. Also, the Baptist Women's World Day of Prayer is November 2nd. I haven't heard anything in terms of ideas for that, because I doubt they'd be meeting together to do so on that day. But I'll try and track down, and if there's not a big group doing something, maybe a smaller group can do something at our church. So just an idea. Or at least be praying on November 2nd, the Baptist Women's Day of Prayer. So I think that is it. So again, thank you, Paul, for coming and joining our small group. And
it was nice to get out.
yeah, it's nice to be near people, right? Not in a Zoom meeting. So, and then you take Carolyn will hand us our things that you want to eat, and we can just
Okay.